Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Quick answer. How much is 2 plus 2? Very easy, right? Now, answer quickly. What is 17 times 24? Now it got a little complicated, right? Do you know why? When I ask you how much 2 plus 2 is, well, your mind automatically responds 4. You've heard this question many times in your life, and your brain has a shortcut to answering it almost automatically. Now, when I ask you to multiply 17 by 24, you have to stop, think, and do the math. Only then can you answer 408. Our brain has these two types of thinking, one fast and one slow. One is not necessarily better than the other, but if you know when to make decisions, when you have to use the fast way of thinking, when to use the slow way, it will make the whole difference to the results you receive in life. In today's Arata Academy summary, we will discuss ideas from the book Thinking Fast and Slow, written by Daniel Kahneman, 2002 Nobel laureate in economics. By understanding these two ways of thinking, you will know how to make better decisions. Avoid thinking fast when you should be thinking slowly, and vice versa. Now attention, this is just a summary of a book. Please read the full disclaimer before proceeding. Your brain has two systems, one for fast, rapid association and another one for maximum capacity. There are two systems in your mind. System 1 is quick thinking. It operates with little effort, almost involuntary. When I ask you how much 2 plus 2 is, your brain immediately says that the answer is 4, even though you don't even want to. Quick thinking is used all the time. It is how the brain understands very simple things, like simple sentences, or the distance between objects, or the emotional conveyed by somebody's facial expression. Think about an experienced driver on an empty street. Even though the act of driving is a complex activity that requires the driver to look at the road ahead, to check the rear view mirrors, to hold the steering wheel, to slam the brakes, maintain some pressure on the accelerator, the brain of an experienced driver already has done it so many times that it operates almost automatically. He can even be talking and singing or reflecting on life while driving down a quiet street. System 2 is slow thinking. When I ask you the result of 17 times 24, your brain doesn't have a shortcut for that is ready to give you an answer. Chances are you've never heard that question before. So your brain has to stop, think slowly, do the math, and then get the result. System 2 is activated by requests that demand effort and attention from your mind. To stick with the same example, think about learning to drive. Well, you need maximum concentration to not crash the car. You need to focus on the track, to coordinate your feet, to step on the right pedals, to use your hands, to hold the steering wheel, and also check the rear view mirror from time to time and also see how other drivers are doing and also pay attention to your surroundings. And System 1 is the quick way of thinking. System 2 is the slow mode. And these two ways of thinking depend on each other. System 1 generates suggestions, emotions, and intuitions for System 2. If validated by System 2, intuitions turn into beliefs and impulses turn into thoughtful actions. The key to making good decisions is knowing when to use System 1 or 2. If you are in a situation that requires a quick response and your brain goes into slow mode, well, you might miss an opportunity. If a situation calls for calm and reflection, but you decide quickly based on intuition and emotion, you might make the wrong decisions. System 1 operates automatically. It is action and reaction. That's why mistakes when making decisions are so frequent. These errors, they are called cognitive biases, and they are difficult to completely prevent. Even so, you can reduce these errors if you learn to recognize what system your brain is operating with. The goal is to identify the situations where you're more likely to make mistakes. This way, you can avoid these mistakes, especially in decisions that have a great impact on your life. Quick thinking takes up most of your time and makes your brain save energy. If you stop to reflect, you will see that most of your life is resolved in automatic mode. Most of your time is taken up by small demands that you can respond to quickly using System 1. For example, you wake up in the morning, you have to decide to get out of bed, you have to decide what to eat, what clothes to wear, what is the time to leave your house, then the next task you have to accomplish at work, the time to stop for a lunch break, what you're gonna eat for lunch, and every little detail of everyday life. These are small, constant decisions in automatic mode. Everything your brain is used to doing is handled by System 1. These habitual responses help your brain to be conserving energy. But what happens in difficult situations? When you are faced with complex problems, System 1 tries to replace difficulty with something easy. We call this heuristics. Heuristics is like a rule of thumb. It refers to a method for solving new problems based on solving previous problems. The heuristic-based answer is usually satisfactory, although not perfect. For example, imagine you are an investor. You need to decide which stock to buy. Now, the logic would be for you to make this decision based on System 2, the slow way of thinking. As an investor, you should be asking a lot of questions. Is it worth buying this company's stock right now at this price? Do the numbers indicate that this price will likely rise in the medium term, on the long term? Should I invest in this particular stock or maybe in another company? Instead of that, System 1 replaces all that complex process and questions with a very simple heuristic. How much do I like this company? Heuristic questions help to navigate life's difficulties. But if a person always avoids thinking slowly, that person might end up validating simple-minded answers to difficult questions. The result is a more difficult life than if the person had actually taken the time to be thinking slowly with the System 2 when they're making these complex decisions. Knowing the most important heuristics and cognitive biases will help you to avoid mistakes when making decisions. Everyone loves heuristics. Everyone has cognitive biases. Everyone wants to find a quick and easy answer, even to the most difficult problems. As attentive and aware as you are, your brain will want shortcuts to the quickest solution. The quick way of thinking is part of our evolution as animals. Our organism evolved with a mission of saving energy to survive. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be held hostage to the quick thinking mode. To get away from the easy answers, you can identify the most important cognitive heuristics and biases. And with this self-awareness, then you can find yourself using these shortcuts, then you can stop, you can breathe, and then you can slowly shift to the slow thinking mode and make the right decision. For example, a major bias that gets into the way of deciding is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is our tendency to interpret information in a way that confirms beliefs that already exist in our mind. Imagine, for example, a person who is a vegetarian, another person who is on a carnivore diet. The vegetarian will seek information that will confirm the belief that removing meat products from their diet is better for health. The person who adheres to the carnivore diet will find studies that will say the opposite. And this is because we selectively pay attention to the data that fits our worldview. Even if subconsciously somewhere we have questions, we also doubt the things that do not fit our beliefs. Another important bias is our tendency to believe that all you see is all there is. When we think in fast mode, we don't consider all the data and all the other alternatives that might exist. This nudges us to the decisions that are based on some superficial and incomplete judgment. And this kind of judgment leads us to other errors. such as the planning fallacy and the sunk cost fallacy. The planning fallacy is the mistake of underestimating the amount of time, energy, and money that a project might consume. Well, maybe can you recall some time when you started some project on your house, planning to spend, let's say, 2,000 in 2 months, but at the end you spent like 10,000 and you spent more than 6 months of work. So this is an example of a planning fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is when you keep investing in a project even if it is obvious it's not going to work. But you've invested in it so much you're now reluctant to give up on that project. If you had a broader view, if you considered the opportunity cost, you probably would have abandoned that project by now. Thinking in numbers helps us to avoid easy, quick, and often wrong answers. But still, the numbers can deceive you. If you involve complex numbers in your decision process, you force your brain to activate system 2, and you start thinking more slowly. However, there are cognitive biases that can lead you to misinterpret what the numbers mean. An example is the law of small numbers. Our system 1 tends to jump to conclusions when we receive information with little data. Statisticians call this a small sample. And small data samples can be confusing because they show extreme results more often than larger data samples. Another example of error is ignoring regression to the mean. We talked about regression to the mean in the episode 161 of the Hello, Sage Arata series. When random numbers define results, there is also a statistical tendency for all of them to return to the mean. And those who are lucky today may suffer in the future. Those who are having bad results today might have good results in the future. There is no specific answer, it's just random. Still, your brain has the tendency to create superficial cause and effect relationships to be explaining why some results are getting worse or better. That is the fallacy of narrative. You create coherent stories to justify something that is random. And then you gain false confidence on how to be able to predict future outcomes. If you just want another example of how numbers can be deceiving, you know that when you discover an extremely expensive product and then you find that product at a discount, the product is still expensive, but when you compare it to the extremely high price, System 1 deceives you. It thinks quickly and then assumes that now the price is right. This is called anchoring. It is a very useful strategy for advertisers to get you to buy products and services at a high price. The first impression is the one that stays, and it influences your decision, especially on impulse buys, without thinking calmly. Availability bias causes emotions to carry too much weight. Cold, rational data are undervalued, while emotions are overvalued in our decision-making process. We tend to use beliefs and stereotypes even when it contradicts the statistics. The illusion that we are rational beings leads us to make wrong decisions. In the 18th century, when industrial capitalism began to evolve, several studies defined consumers as rational beings and the markets as something highly efficient. The expected utility theory says that people are rational agents who can calculate the utility of each situation to make the best decision. Now, the problem is that expected utility theory has failed to explain our aversion to risk. Imagine if you are in an experiment and you need to decide between two options. In the first option, you have 80% chance of winning $100 or 20% chance of just winning $10. In the second option, you are sure you're guaranteed to earn $80. Which option would you choose? If the expected utility theory really worked, the logical decision would be that most people would choose the first option because it has a higher expected value. But the reality is that most people would prefer this second option, the one that has an expected value that is lower. The calculation of the expected value on the first option is 80% of $100 plus 20% of $10. This is the equivalent of $80 plus $2, and therefore the expected value of the first option is $82. Now, in the second option, the expected value is 100% of $80, which is $80. So mathematically, the expected value of the first option is higher. Now, the flaw in expected utility theory is that we are not as rational and logical as we think. Most of the time, we act on emotion. And then to compensate for this shortcoming, Daniel Kahneman formulated another theory to explain our decisions. That is prospect theory. This theory was cited in the decision to award him the 2002 Nobel Prize in Economics. It is a theory that can help you to think straight when you're making a decision. The prospect theory shows that your decisions depend on your individual preferences. Decisions don't just consider objective data, numbers. Decisions are influenced by the prospect of changing your frame of reference. In this perspective of change, the possibility of losing something that we already have, it will trigger stronger emotions than the prospect of gaining that very thing. And there is a whole evolutionary explanation for this, as you can imagine that the organisms that avoid threats, they have the tendency to survive longer than organisms that ignore that and just seek opportunities. So we are all much more averse to losing than we are willing to win. That is why in the previous experiment, most people reject the first option, the one that had 80% chance of winning $100, which is really, really big, but it has 20% chance of possible pain, of just earning $10. That creates a strong dislike. If you took the first option, and if you had happened to just win $10, you would not feel as good as you thought you could have, because it's like you're missing $100. Not only that, you're also missing the chance to choose the second option, in which you would be guaranteed to win $80. Whenever you assess a situation, you're making comparisons, and this comparison usually is between your current state and the expected outlook. For example, you can imagine that you expect a salary increase at the end of the year, and if that doesn't come, you become sad, even though your current situation has not worsened. The frame of reference also influences the comparisons. For example, if you have a salary equivalent to $100, and then you get a raise of $100, you are very happy. But if you have a $1,000 salary, and then you get $100 of raise, the level of happiness is not the same. The more you have, the less subjective impact a change will have. Even the value, though the value of the increase objectively is the same. Knowing the practical effects of prospect theory will help you to make better decisions. There are at least 4 practical implications of prospect theory that you need to know about how to improve your decision-making process. The possibility effect, the certainty effect, the status quo bias, and the framing effects. The possibility effect is the bias to overestimate the possibility of winning something. Our brain, when it's thinking fast, will fantasize about small chances of making disproportionately large gains. Well, that's what makes us be betting $1 on the lottery in the hopes of winning $1 million. That makes it so attractive, even though statistically the chances of that happening are slim to none. On the other side of probability, we have the certainty effect. Let's explain this one with an example. How happy would you be in each one of these following situations where you're vying to win a prize worth $1 million? Number 1, an increase from 0% to 5% chance. Number 2, 5% to 10% increase in your odds. Number 3, increase from 60% to 65% chance. And number 4, increase from 95% to 100% chance. If you are like most people, when you think fast, your joy would be euphoric when it increases from 95% to 100%. The reason is the effect of certainty, because now you are sure that you will win. However, when you think slowly, you should realize that you already had a very, very, very high chance at 95%. Another very happy situation is when you increase your chances of winning from 0% to 5%. Now there is a possibility. This is the possibility effect. Before you were guaranteed to have zero chances, but now with 5% chance, at least you can hope to get lucky. That's what makes people play the lottery. But when you think slowly, you should note that that is still a very, very small chance. There is also an interesting situation that happens when you increase the chance from 5% to 10%. Now we can say that your odds have doubled, and that is also quite impressive. Also, if you're thinking fast. The most awkward situation of all is when we increase the 60% chance to 65%. We don't make any meaning out of that. We don't have absolutely certainty, we're not coming from absolute zero, we're not doubling the odds. It is just 5% more. But now, examine all the four situations by thinking slowly using System 2. In all four situations, what's happening is exactly the same. It is a 5% increase in your odds. However, our quick thinking evaluates each one of them in a completely different way. That's interesting, right? Let's remember that we're talking here about the prospect theory. In this example, we just explained the possibility effect and also the certainty effect. But also we need to explain the status quo bias and the framing effects. In the status quo bias, you like what you have already achieved. You don't want to lose what you already have, even if your past self was indifferent about having that achievement or not. Imagine this situation. Your boss says that you will be promoted. You hadn't asked for a promotion, but now you're very happy with that achievement. And soon after, the boss says that, oops, he made a mistake and actually the promotion was for another employee. Now you will feel a great loss. Your past self didn't even expect a promotion, but now you're so attached to this idea when the promotion was announced. Now you feel the loss of knowing it was a mistake. Lastly, we have the framing effects. You know the story about seeing a glass half full, half empty, depending on your point of view? Well, the way we frame a situation influences your emotions and affects our decisions. For example, imagine that you're sick. Now you're going to need a surgery. How would you prefer to hear your chances from the doctor? He could announce that you have 90% chance of surviving. Or he could say that you have a 10% chance of dying in the surgery. Both mean the same thing, but most of us would prefer the positive framing of knowing that we have 90% chance of survival. Each person has two selves, the experiencing self and the remembering self. The last part of the book deals with a new focus in the work of Daniel Kahneman, which is happiness. This is a much more complex and difficult concept to research compared to economic concepts for our decision making. You need to understand there are two major types of happiness. There is momentary happiness, and there is also, which is defined as the joy in a particular moment, and there is also lasting happiness. That is the general feeling of happiness and well-being. In other words, there is the happiness that we are experiencing right now, and there is also the happiness that we remember. This can give rise to the idea of two selves, the experiencing self and also the remembering self. The experiencing self answers the question, are you happy now? Is it hurting now? It is the self that feels pain and pleasure moment to moment. This ongoing experience can best be measured by the total sum of the happy moments over time. Now, the remembering self, on the other hand, will answer the following question. How was that experience on the whole? Here we have the person who has to be reflecting on the past experiences and then making a general assessment of what they remember. These memories of the past have a huge influence on how we think. After the moment of pain or joy has passed, only the remembering self exists when we're thinking about our past. Therefore, the remembering self is the one that usually makes the decisions that affect our future. The remembering self assesses the decision-making scenario differently than the experiencing self in two ways. These two ways are called the peak and rule and the duration neglect. The peak and rule makes our assessment of certain events in the past determined by the peak intensity of the experience and also the end of the experience. It doesn't care so much about the average of the experience. Imagine, for example, that you're a big fan of the Lord of the Rings series, movies, and you have decided to travel to New Zealand and see the filming locations. Everything went wrong on that trip. Your flight was delayed, you missed the connection, the suitcase didn't arrive, the credit card was cancelled, it was raining too much. However, during that trip, you got to know the Shire and even you got to meet one of the actors of that movie in person. That was the peak of the experience. Also, at the end of the trip, the weather changed, it was so much nicer, and you were able to see some good sights in New Zealand. In the future, when the remembering self is recalling that trip, it will rate it as a positive experience, even though most of the trip was bad, most of the time, the weather was terrible, but you had a good spike of it, the intensity was good, and also it ended well. The duration neglect rule says that the duration of the experience has a little impact, a little effect on the memory of an experience. The book mentions an experiment with 150 patients who underwent a very painful medical procedure. The shortest procedure lasted only 4 minutes. The longest one lasted over an hour. And when they were evaluating the total amount of pain, the duration of the experiment did not affect the perception of the suffering. This is the rule of neglect of duration that is observed in practice. The duration of an experience has little effect on the memory that we have on that experience. We prioritize the remembering self over the experiencing self. We're more interested in having good memories of the past than to actually be experiencing the good moments in the present moment. Imagine if somebody, for example, offered you free vacations. You can go to an amazing, wonderful place. However, you need to sign a contract in which, at the end of the trip, you must swallow a forgetting pill. So you will never remember anything from that vacation at all. And all the photos you took would be also erased from your cell phone. Would you go? Probably not. With this imaginary situation, we can see that it is very important for us to be able to have memories of our holidays. And this explains the difference between the remembering self and the experiencing self. In other words, it is not enough just to experience. We have a biased opinion that it is more important even to remember what we experienced. Because of our tendency to overvalue this remembering self, you can achieve a balance by training your mind consciously to value more this experiencing self. How can you do that? For example, you can focus more time on things that give you pleasure at the time and less time on things that cause you pain at the moment. One of the ways to have more happiness is to learn to value the present moment, to give more importance to your experiencing self. Beware of the illusion of focus. Your mood is strongly determined by what you're thinking about. Assessing your degree of satisfaction with your own life and the decisions that you make is a difficult process that can only be done by System 2, the slow way of thinking. The right thing would be to consider all the factors in your life, giving the proper importance to each one of these things. Only then you would be able to arrive at a correct assessment of your degree of satisfaction. But is that what we do? Of course not. Instead, our System 1 is replacing all that complex thinking about life satisfaction with some easier question like, how am I feeling right now? Instead of considering the whole, the quick thinking system focuses on just one point in life and then expands that feeling about that point to all other areas of our life. It contaminates. This is the danger of the illusion of focus. A clear example, imagine a teenager who's experiencing the first crush that has not been reciprocated. The entire focus of that teenage mind is about this uncorresponded love, and that will be expanding this dissatisfaction to all other areas of life, starting to think that everything is wrong. When you try to predict your happiness in the future, you're likely to overestimate the effect that you would come with all that changes that you're focused on. For For example, imagine, oh, if you just lost those extra kilos, then you would be much happier. If you get that promotion at work, then you would be much happier. If you manage to get that house, you would be happier. This is the illusion of focus in action. Your brain is putting too much value on that thing that you're focused on. The solution is the same as the other points that have already been presented so far. Instead of thinking fast and jumping to conclusions, stop, breathe, and reflect. Put your system 2 into action. Weigh all the factors that influence your well-being, and you will find that in the long run, none of these things are actually going to have a big impact on your long-term happiness. Our brain has 2 ways of thinking, one fast and one slow. These are respectively called System 1 and System 2. System 1 operates automatically and quickly, with little to no effort. System 2, on the other hand, allocates attention to mental activities that require more effort, including complex calculations. System 2 operations are often associated with the subjective experiences of activity, choice, and concentration. One system is not actually superior to the other, but you can greatly improve your intelligence when you're making decisions if you know how to recognize when to use fast thinking and when to use slow thinking. For you who are interested in increasing your intelligence levels in this way, now I invite you to take a look at the Arata Academy Intelligence course. And you can see that right now by going to arata.se/intelligence.